President Trump stepped on Joseph Biden's big moment accepting the Democratic nomination Thursday, showing up on the outskirts of his rival's birth city to warn Pennsylvanians they'll forfeit their guns, fracking and idyllic suburbs if the other side wins in November. He told supporters at Mariotti Building Products in Old Forge, Pennsylvania. The only thing they're not abolishing is taxes. The president has refused to cede the spotlight during the week of the Democratic National Convention. He keeps muscling in to offer harsh reviews of the Democrats' program or spar with former President Obama, who at midweek said Mr. Trump was incapable of growing into the Oval Office job. President Trump said he wasn't impressed by Senator Kamala Harris's history-making speech as the vice presidential candidate, either. Mr. President said of Vice President Mike Pence, "I watched Kamala last night and said I'll take Mike." President Trump's stop at the home supplier near Mr. Biden's birthplace of Scranton was his fifth visit to a swing state this week. The president drew a straight line between Mr. Biden's bid and violent protests in cities such as Minneapolis and Portland, reviving his mantra of law and order. He said, "At stake in this election is the survival of our nation, it's true. Because we're dealing with crazy people on the other side." President Trump faulted Mr. Biden for Obamacare's Cadillac tax on generous health plans, which upset unions until it was repealed in 2019, and promoted a forthcoming, favored nations, order to align the price of doctor-administered drugs with what other countries pay. President Trump said he's trying to end wars the Obama-Biden team couldn't and reprised his complaints about widespread mail-in balloting, suggesting it is ripe for fraud that would benefit Democrats. President Trump said, "The only way they're going to win is by a rigged election." The president spoke hours before the primetime address from Mr. Biden, who moved to Delaware as a child but tends to highlight his blue-collar roots in swing state Pennsylvania. President Trump said, "He'll remind us that he was born in Scranton, but you know he left like 70 years ago." Many polls show the former vice president with a single-digit lead over Mr. President, with a 5.7 percentage point edge in the Real Clear Politics average. President Trump won Pennsylvania by 44,000 voters in 2016 and sees it as key to his re-election chances. Mr. Trump told supporters, "We love this state, we won this state. I went to school in Pennsylvania, as you know." The president will receive the Republican nomination on Monday in a live-streamed vote from Charlotte, North Carolina. Attendance will be limited by corona rules in North Carolina. 6 delegates from each state and territory, or 336 in all, and a small group of reporters will be able to attend in person, according to the Republican National Convention. The president will deliver a live speech accepting the nomination from the White House on Thursday. President Trump has been crisscrossing the country this week to remind Americans of what the economy looked like before the pandemic that's killed over 173,000 in the United States. He stopped in Wisconsin, Minnesota and Arizona for campaign-style speeches and touched down in Iowa for a brief update on its recovery from a high-wind derecho that destroyed acres of crops. The Labor Department said over 1.1 million Americans filed new unemployment claims last week. That's up from just under 1 million the prior week, a sign that layoffs continue and there may be rough economic seas ahead. The president on Thursday repeated a misleading claim that New Zealand had a massive outbreak after seeming to conquer the virus. It's barely cracked a dozen cases per day, while the United States sees over 40,000, and claimed Pennsylvania Governor Tom Wolf won't reopen the economy until after the election. Mr. Biden has slammed Mr. Trump's handling of the pandemic. He says governors should issue mask mandates and says Democrats will build back better. Though Mr. President got a head start on Mr. Biden's airtime, one of his former allies threatened to take over the news cycle. Former White House chief strategist Stephen Bannon was arrested Thursday on wire fraud charges. Federal prosecutors in New York allege that Mr. Bannon and others siphoned money from an online campaign set up to raise private funds for the president's signature wall along the Mexico border. The president said he didn't like the fundraising project and hasn't associated with Mr. Bannon for a long time. Mr. President Trump said, "I don't know that he was in charge. I didn't know any of the other people even. It's sad, it's very sad."